Hello and welcome to Inspired Sports. I'm your host, Alex Pratt, alongside the Scott Jakeway.
What is up, Alex? This is going to be a fun one, I think. Let's jump right in.
I think so. This is the best part of my week. I think it's the best part of all of our listeners' weeks. I just assume that it is. So that's the way we're
Oh,
going to
yeah.
act. They're hungry, and they are hungry for instant reactions. And we've got instant reactions for you because on a busy Thursday night of sports, we had a Major League Baseball championship series going on. Earlier in the day, we saw that the Arizona Diamondbacks beat the Phillies 2-1. And as our resident of Arizona, I'm going to let you tell me how that makes you feel.
Listen, it was actually one of those games. I only caught bits and pieces of it just because it was earlier in the day. But watching the how much both teams scored, I know we talked a lot about the Phillies and the Diamondbacks. Whoever was going to have the long ball, more was going to be the winner. And this was kind of like the opposite, where
Yeah.
we didn't see a whole lot of run production. I love the fact it was reminiscent. The Ketel Marte walk off was a little reminiscent of Luis
Don't you
Gonzalez
do that.
2001 World Series. It was come on, a little blooper center field. I
I'm
mean, come on,
so
it was a
listen. We
lot of
didn't
fun.
talk about this. I can't believe you brought that up. That's one of my favorite sports moments. Listen, as we
No
continue to
way.
do, Meet the Hosts and our Meet the Host episodes, where we just talk about our favorites of everything, and people get a chance to know us a little
Oh
bit
yeah.
better. I was already thinking because that's part of Meet the Host is talk about your favorite sports memories, and I remember exactly where I was when Luis Gonzalez got that hit. I was sitting on the edge of my bed. This is not a story or an exaggeration. This is a true account, okay? Sitting on the edge of my bed late at night, and I'm watching the game on an old tube TV that's in my room. It's not more than 13 inches. Okay, I'm watching it, and I don't like the Diamondbacks. I don't care about
Oh,
Luis Gonzalez. I care about two things, okay? My boy Mark Grace, Chicago Cub legend,
oh yeah.
more hits than any player in the 90s. By the way, for the full
Oh
decade, he had
wow.
more hits than any other player. That's a fun stat
Wow.
for you.
That's a fun stat right
He had
there.
just gotten to the Diamondbacks, and I wanted him to get a ring because he was never going to get one with that version of the Cubs. And the other thing I was super all in on was I did not want the Yankees to win, and I'm so anti-Yankees. I know we're
Neither
already
did
off the
I.
rails. We can't even get through instant reactions without getting off the rails.
No,
But you brought up Luis Gonzalez and the bloop single. Man, that's one of my favorite
it
sports
was
moments.
a
I got in trouble. My mom yelled at me. I was a teenager. My mom yelled at me because I screamed. It's like late at night. It's the end of the game, and I'm like,
yeah.
yeah. And she's like, shut up.
I'll never forget. We were on the porch or the front of our church. Me and a couple of my buddies were all hanging out. It was like after service, everyone just kind of chilling. And my buddy's dad had one of those cars. It's 2001, so technology wasn't where it was today. And he had one of those like TV in a car kind of thing.
No, did he really?
And so none of us were watching it. We were all just hanging out, and all of a sudden he just screams at the top of his lungs, and we all knew what was going on. So we all booked it towards the car, saw the video, the replay. It was a really cool experience. I'll never forget it. That was a lot of fun to watch. Obviously, I want this series to be competitive, so I was glad to see a sweep was avoided. And we'll see how tomorrow goes. Hopefully, they can tie it up 2-2, and we can go back to Philadelphia tied up and really take this thing long term. So a lot of
I'm
fun.
okay with that. What are the two
Yeah.
greatest words in sports? Game 7. So as much as I want the
Game
Phillies to
7.
win,
Yep.
the two greatest words in
Yep.
all of sports are Game 7. So I'm okay if it ends up running a little longer. I'm all in on the Phillies. I'm
Same.
unashamedly saying that I want the Phillies to
No.
win, and I enjoy watching them
Let's go
because
D-backs.
they earlier in the week they smoked the D-backs 10-0. Like
That's
they were
true.
just launching bombs. So anyway,
Yep.
we'll catch up more on that series as it happens over the weekend, and bring that to you on our show on Monday. But we also saw in the late game, we saw the Astros beat the Rangers 10-3.
Yep. That was one of those games that, I mean, this series has really kind of gone full circle. I mean, we saw the Rangers take the first two games, and I really thought, like, I was surprised because Astros tend to, at least as of late in recent years, have been a playoff team, and the Rangers have not been that. And so for them to go up 2-0, I really was like, okay, is this going to be one of those series that completely catches us all off guard? And the Astros came back in game 3, and they took game 3, and then tonight they handled business. 10-3 really showed us that reminiscent of Astros of old. Be interesting to see if both of them go game 6, game 7, really extend this thing. I mean, I guess they have to go game 6 at least. But to see them to take it into game 6, game 7, that's really what you all want, right? Playoff sports, you either want this like real clean sweep, especially if it's your team, or you want it to go to game 7. I mean, there's really no in between.
The
No,
dreaded, we're up 3-0,
yeah,
and then the fourth game, you guys got one. Okay, so we all just wasted
yep,
3 days because we know it's going to end in the game
exactly.
5. Yeah,
No
I'm
one
with you.
wants a game 5 series, so it's either sweep or game 7. So I'm hoping that both go game 7. So
You nailed it. That wasn't the only sports happening tonight that we have an instant reaction for. There was, of course, Thursday night football. The
uh,
Jacksonville Jaguars beat the New Orleans Saints
uh,
31-24 in dramatic fashion as
eh,
with just minutes left on the clock. Trevor Lawrence, the questionable for the game, Trevor Lawrence, the wearing a knee
yep.
brace, Trevor Lawrence, hits Christian Kirk for a 44-yard touchdown that he took all the way to the house. And that led him to have 6 receptions for 90 yards. Trevor Lawrence finished 20 of 29 with only 204, surprisingly, and 1 touchdown.
Yeah.
But he did. Here's the real surprising stat from this game. The leader in rushing yards for the Jacksonville Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence, 59
Yeah.
yards. And he
Yeah.
did it when they didn't think he was going to be able to move around in the pocket. He ends up leading the team in rushing with a knee brace on. So I don't know what that says about the situation, but I do know that the Jaguars were expected to win this game, and they did. Did you see anything surprising?
No, I mean, I've heard a lot of whispers about the Saints being a team that could make a late year run, and I just think this kind of proved they are kind of that mid range team that is likely going to miss the playoffs. There's really no hope for them. Derek Carr, great guy outside of football, not really a quarterback that's going to lead anything major. I said Trevor Lawrence was in our last episode. We talked who was the biggest deal. Trevor Lawrence is who I said, and I will stick with it that because of how close this game was, if he doesn't play, I think the Jaguars lose the game. So
But one thing we do agree on is that we both wish we were NFL general managers. And I know if you were an NFL general manager and if I was an NFL general manager, because we've played fantasy
yep,
football together before, we would
for
be trading
years. Yep.
players every single week, which leads me to a new part of Inspired Sports where you and I do a little something we like to call wheeling and dealing. We're going to give you trades that we believe are good for both teams. Okay, so there's no just making a trade that you just want to happen, and it has to make some sense for both sides of the trade. And for this edition of Wheeling and Dealing, we will be doing some NFL trades because the NFL trade deadline is around the corner. Trades are already happening. Earlier this week, the Kansas City Chiefs brought home Mecole Hardman back to the team looking for some wide receiver help. And that got you and me thinking, what really needs to happen? What trades are an absolute must? So I'm going to let you kick this off. What do you think is a trade or two that must happen in the NFL this week?
Absolutely. Okay, so this is a lot of fun. All those years of playing fantasy football, making these off the wall trades that you get the little power of making these deals that probably would never happen in real life. So to really stop and think what makes sense for both teams, try to be a little bit more realistic than maybe fantasy football lends to. And so my first one that I'm going with is the Washington Commanders trading Chase Young to the New York Giants
Ooh.
for Saquon Barkley.
A
Obviously,
defensive end for a running back? Oh, I need to hear
a
this.
defensive end for running back. Okay, so here's the thing. If there's one thing that would kind of put the final touches on a Washington Commanders team that has actually been fairly competitive this year in some of the games is a solid running back. I know Saquon Barkley has dealt with injuries over the years, but there's no arguing. You cannot deny his just raw talent, his pure talent.
Right.
And if there's one thing that team is lacking, not only this year, but just it seems like every year. I think that's why we see so many quarterbacks get injured with the Commanders. They have a history of just quarterback after quarterback after quarterback. And I really think it's because defenses look at that as a one lane offense. They know that the offense is ran through the quarterback. They do not ever have that complementing running back to finalize that offense. And so I think if they could get a player like Saquon Barkley, it would really bring that whole package together. And the same thing kind of goes for the New York Giants, but for the opposite reasons. Now, we all have agreed on this podcast that Daniel Jones is overpaid and not going to be a quarterback of the future. But if there's one thing that the New York Giants have sorely been just been terrible at this year, it's allowing the other team just to run the number on the scoreboard up. And so if you put a Chase Young on that kind of team, I think that their defense becomes a little bit more
You want
intimidating.
you want Kayvon
Offensive,
Thibodeau on one end and Chase Young on the other. I see what you're doing.
exactly. Next one is going to be a little personal for me. As we all know, I am a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan, but I have been admittedly not the biggest Dak Prescott fan.
No,
So
he's trading
as I
his
was looking,
quarterback. He's trading his
listen,
quarterback.
this one's gonna be interesting. I'm
For
probably gonna
what?
get a little flack for
Ham
this one.
sandwich? Can we get a
Nope.
ham sandwich for Dak Prescott? That sounds like a good deal.
Okay, so I think if the Dallas Cowboys took Dak Prescott and 2 second-round picks and maybe a fourth, a third,
Okay.
or a fourth, we throw in some picks in there to balance things
Two
out.
twos, a third,
I
a
am
fourth, and
saying
Dak.
Dak Prescott being sent to the Baltimore Ravens for Lamar Jackson.
What?
Listen, hear me out here. Dak Prescott has not been the biggest fan favorite, and we know Lamar Jackson has not been a fan of the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, man.
There was this whole back and forth of whether he was actually going to be back. Are we going to trade? Are we going to sign him?
Yeah.
There was this whole drama between the Ravens and Jackson. And so I think even though that, they smooth things out and, we talk things over and it's like a bad, boyfriend girlfriend relationship, all of a sudden you think they're going to break up and then they're back together and they're promising that they've worked everything out. And then, 6 months later, they're still fighting and on the brink of breaking up. So I kind of see how that is with Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. I really don't think that they smoothed everything over. I think that it was just simply to put a smile on for the cameras, and there really is still some turmoil there. So I say trade him, bring in Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is, again, one of those players that is a talented quarterback.
All right. I can't take any more of this from the Cowboys fan. I can't take this anymore. First of all, poor Dak. I mean, after his longest rushing touchdown of the year, which was of his career, actually, 18 yards last week, his longest one of his career, you're like, that's not enough rushing. So you're just coming at him. We told the people at the beginning of this that when we do wheeling and dealing, that we have to make a trade that makes sense for both sides. I loved your first trade. That was that was so creative and made a lot of sense for both sides. This is absurd. Dak would be going to Baltimore where he has worse weapons. So he is going to even be worse there than he would be in Dallas. And they just went through all of that trouble. You're like, hey, I think there's some friction there between the team and Lamar. I'm like, no. They just went through all of that trouble and all of that work and finally got it settled. And I think they're going to win their division this year. And I think that they're going to be a legitimate contender for a Super Bowl run this year. There's been too much Cowboys talk on this podcast for too long. Okay. I know we made a rule that the baby Cowboys onesie that you got hanging back behind you stays up and, until they lose. But that doesn't mean we have to talk about them every minute of every show. So I'm moving on to my two proposed
let's hear 'em.
trades that I think are actually good for both sides. Okay. My first one is this.
Right.
I think it is time set Davante Adams free. Let him free from the dysfunction of the Las Vegas Raiders. So I propose this. Davante Adams to the Ravens, who you were just talking about, for a first-round pick and a third-round pick. And let me explain why I think this makes sense. First of all, the Raiders just traded for Davante Adams, and they gave up a first and a second. So the Raiders will be getting back almost everything that they gave up, and the Ravens would be getting a real receiver. It is time for the Ravens to have a real receiver. This joke of a signing when they signed OBJ in the offseason, and he's already been injured like 9 times, and he'll be injured 7 more times this week. And that was never a real solution for them. Lamar is throwing the ball with the best efficiency of his career. Get him a real receiver. Rashad Bateman is not that guy, okay? Zay Flowers looks good so far this year for a rookie receiver, but he's not that guy. They're faster, thinner, gadgety kind of receivers. Get him a big-bodied Devontae Adams. Can you imagine Devontae Adams and Mark Andrews? What ball could he throw up that they're not going to come down with? Those guys are huge, fast, strong, and it changes the dynamic of your offense when you have Devontae Adams on the outside. I think it makes perfect sense for them. I think they need to go all. You just paid Lamar. So go all in on a Super Bowl run. There's nothing else. There's nothing left to do. There's no we're building for the future. You went all in by making him a $45 million a year quarterback. So go get the player he needs. And it was just this week that Devontae Adams said, he had a quote and he said, "I'm not just here to hang out," which I thought was such a fantastic quote because it immediately made me think of all of his Taco Bell commercials where all he's doing is hanging out in his house eating Taco Bell, which by the way, those are great. Those are great. I love those. But obviously, Devontae Adams went to the Raiders to play with his college quarterback, Derek Carr, and they immediately got rid of him the next year. So he's not happy about that. He knows they're terrible. Jimmy Garoppolo is already injured. Aiden O'Connell is going to be starting this Sunday. They're going to lose again. And the Raiders just need to embrace the tank. Embrace the tank.
Wow.
Okay? Because you are in a division with Patrick Mahomes and you are in a division with Justin Herbert. And Jimmy Garoppolo and Aiden O'Connell are not going to get it done. You need to just lose as many games as you can this year and climb that draft chart to try to get Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, someone who brings you at least the hope that you could compete on a level with Mahomes and Herbert.
There's only one thing I'm going to say about this trade. Very nice trade. I like it. I think it makes sense for both teams. But I will say this. Devontae Adams to the Ravens right after the Ravens trade Lamar to Dallas. Dak
and Devontae. Don't try and mix our trades. That's not how this works.
You just said Dak would be going to a receiving core that's worse, but not if they traded for Devontae.
Nobody wants Dak Prescott. Stop. Quit trying to
I'm just saying.
What I honestly, I'm gonna have to think about that before the next show. How many teams would actually give up their quarterback for Dak Prescott and his contract? That's a fun thing to think about. We'll figure that out for the next episode. My next trade.
All right, let's hear the second one. I want to hear the
second trade. Here we go. The King Henry, Derrick Henry to the Bucks for a 3rd and a 5th round pick. To the Bucks for a 3rd and 5th round pick. I'm going to make it make perfect sense for both sides. So you just sit back and soak up the goodness, okay? Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill are in their last years of their contract, and both will be free agents after this season. So this was clearly the Tennessee Titans were running this back one more time because a couple years ago they were the number 1 seed and they had figured out a defensive and running situation and play action with Ryan Tannehill hitting bombs to A.J. Brown. Then they foolishly traded A.J. Brown and the offense fell apart. The defense doesn't look quite as good. Ryan Tannehill is clearly not an elite quarterback. And now you have the greatness that is Derrick Henry being wasted. So he is in the last year of his contract. Get something for him, Tennessee. If you're going to tear this thing down when the year's over, just go ahead and get something for him now and send him to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 29th in the league in rushing yards per game. And while we all know that Baker Mayfield is an amazing quarterback that can carry a team through the passing game, every quarterback needs some help. Even Tom Brady, when he was in Tampa, went to the GM and said, "I need Leonard Fournette. Go get me Leonard Fournette." And they did. They did his bidding, and it worked out, and they got a Super Bowl. So I say, Bucks, you need to get Baker Mayfield a running back. And I say King Henry. Go get King Henry. I'm telling you right now, it'll make all the difference. You'll win the division. You'll make a run through the playoffs. That needs to happen. And I think a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick is a quality return for a running back that we know is in the last year of their contract. So I think the Titans would be in on that package, and the Bucks need it.
I have to disagree with one thing with this trade. Something you said. Baker Mayfield is not an elite quarterback. I mean, the trade itself makes perfect sense.
Oh, hold on. Just answer one question for me before you go. Is Baker
Okay.
Mayfield the best quarterback in his division? Desmond Ritter, Bryce Young, Derek Carr. Is he not clearly the best quarterback in his division?
He is the best in his division, but
Say it
that's
again.
like the G League of NFL. That division is like the G League of the NFL. Let's crisscross sports,
In the NFL,
but
when you can win your division, you win your division, okay? And if what they need is
okay,
a little
yeah.
help in the run game, I think this makes sense.
It does make sense. I will give it to you. The trade itself makes sense. But let's go on to our next segment, a little one we like to call Rank It.
Rank it.
So here's what I want to do, Alex. Shifting sports. We both know we're both very excited. We've talked a lot of football, we've dabbled in a little baseball, and we've dropped a couple hints about basketball, but we are seeing the season start in just a few
It's
days. So
coming.
it is coming and I cannot wait. It's one of my favorite things, beginning of the year, NBA. One, two, three. I want to hear the top three players that you would start a franchise with.
The top
I
three
think I
players that
know
I would start a
top
franchise
three
with.
players. The
Playing
top
GM
three
again.
players that you would start.
This is
Yeah.
the GM episode.
The
GM
GM
Alex
episode.
Pratt.
Yep.
This has a nice ring to
We've
it.
played the GM of the the GM of football and what trades make sense at the trade deadline. Now that we're starting the NBA season, I want to hear from you. If you were an NBA executive, who are the three players that you are building your team around?
All right,
They
I'm
have to
ready.
be in the league right now, and they are at their current uh, play. We're not talking LeBron James of 2009 or
Oh yeah. No,
2010.
no.
We're, yeah,
Today's
yeah.
player. I'm an
Today.
expansion team, and I can take any
Okay.
one
Yep.
player to start my franchise with. That's what you're saying.
To build it all around.
Perfect.
Yep.
Here we go.
Yep.
I'm gonna go 3, 2, 1. The
Okay.
third person I would take is 25 years old, averaged 31 points a game last year, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, and he has an amazing 3-letter initial SGA. Shai Gilgeous Alexander. You're like, oh, really? You're going to take the guy out of Oklahoma City? I am, because he is 25 years old. He is leading a team, and I think you're going to see this year as Chet Holmgren gets integrated into that team. You're going to see what he can really do as the leader of that team. I'm saying this for one very clear reason. He's 25, and I think there's another leap coming. I don't think this is his ceiling. So
Oh wow.
that may
Okay.
surprise anyone who maybe you're not watching a lot of Oklahoma City basketball, or you didn't see him in college, but I'm telling you he's got
No.
all of the tools that you want in a player that you're going to build around. But
Yeah, absolutely.
number 2, very simple. Victor Wembanyama. All in on Wemby, baby. 7 foot
Bro, he
4,
had
19 years old, hasn't played a single game yet. And if you gave me the
he
choice, he'd be my
hasn't.
second choice. All in.
Wow.
All in on
Wow.
Wemby, baby. Have you
Oh
seen
my
some of the stuff he's
gosh.
doing in the preseason? He is out there clowning on fools. He's 7 foot 4 with the handles of a guard, man. He's everything you want. I'm personally, I'm a little frustrated that the Spurs keep getting generational players just whenever it's convenient. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Kawhi Leonard, and then Wemby. There, I mean, 3 of them were #1 picks. I don't know how they do it. I don't know who they're paying in the NBA lottery to make that happen, but I'm all in on Wemby. I think he's. If I'm building a franchise, you're going to notice this as a theme through my 3 choices. I want someone who's young. I want someone that I'm going to get a lot of years out of. I'm not trying to immediately compete. I'm trying to build a team, build a brand, build a franchise, build a legacy. So I'm going Victor Wembanyama as my second choice. I think it won't take long into the season for you to agree. Wow, because here's the thing. I'll say this and I'll be done on Wembanyama. Yes, we don't fully know what he's going to be yet, but the NBA prospects are different than any other sport. Prospect comes through in baseball and they're like, man, they're the best person in this draft. There's no one like them. Often, much more often than other sports, that person can struggle, maybe not even make the majors or have a short lived career. Same thing happens in football. This is the greatest quarter. Jamarcus Russell is the greatest
Yep.
quarterback we've ever seen. Ryan Leaf is the greatest quarterback.
RG3.
RG3 is going to change the league. Tim Couch is unstoppable. Like, there is a litany of guys taken in the top 3 that are just Zach Wilson. I don't know what we're going to do without Zach Wilson. So it's very hit or miss.
Yeah.
But basketball
Yeah.
prospects, when they start talking about people the way they're talking about Victor Wembanyama, and they're saying, "Man, this is the most polished, highest ceiling prospect we've seen since LeBron." And then who was it before LeBron? Was it Tim Duncan? And who was it before Tim Duncan? It was Shaq. And who was it before
Yeah.
Shaq? And it was Olajuwon. And who was it before Olajuwon? It was Magic and Bird.
Yeah.
All those guys hit. Like, they all hit. It wasn't a question. It wasn't
Yeah.
Anthony Bennett taken at the top of the draft by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like, it's like he's not Anthony Bennett. It's like these guys are watching him. They're going, it's going. If he stays healthy, it's going to work. And so I'm
Yeah.
all in on Wemby. And then number 1, though, the one person I would take over Wembanyama, Luka. Give me some Luka. I love me some Luka.
No.
I know he is a love him or
No.
hate him player, but Luka is only 24
Oh.
years old. He's been named to 4 straight first team All NBA, averaged 32 last year, 8 rebounds and 8 assists. Like, what else do you want? And I think the way he plays the game, his game is sustainable. He's not Derrick Rose. He's not Russell Westbrook. He's not a type of a player who's hyper athletic, where you're like, oh man, that his game's going to crash in 5 years because his body's going to break down. He's out there looking like that dude that you play in a pickup game, and you're like, I don't know, I'll take that guy. And he just starts making it rain. And even though he looks like he's moving in slow motion, like Escalade from the old And One videos, you can't stop him from getting to the rim. Like, it's boom. Give me some Luka. Plus, that's what I want. I want a one named player to build my franchise around. Give me a Wemby. Give me a Luka. Give me a LeBron. You know what I mean? Like, give me that. Give me a Steph. Give me that
SGA.
SGA.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So those are my 3. I'll get out of the way. I know you love your NBA. Give me the 3 players that you would start a franchise with today.
Okay, so you definitely went the young core, like, take it literal. I need someone that is young buck that I can build my team around and last for, 10, 15 years. I like Wemby. I think that he's got a lot of potential, especially now I see him gaining 10, 15, 20 pounds. I was a little nervous before coming into preseason. SGA, definitely, I could see him taking a leap and transitioning a team to that next elite level. Luka, love him or hate him. You love him, I hate him. I'm not going to spend too much time there. I went a little different route. I went kind of established, a player that has proven themselves, a player that has already won some championships.
You're chasing a ring in year 1. So, that's what you're building your team like. Listen, you're going after a ring in year 1.
If there's one thing in really any professional sports, but in the NBA, you have to have leadership. You have to have someone that is going to lead your team and be able to make the others around you. There's only 5 of you on the court at one time. It's very run and gun. Sometimes you play several minutes without a stop. So there's not a lot of, in the NFL, every play you can bring players in and out. Baseball, it's very singular performance when you're at the plate, that kind of thing. With basketball, you have to really build around all 5. And if one is a weak link,
I know who you got. I already know it. I already know.
All right,
give it to me.
So number 3, I'm starting with Steph Curry. We've already seen it in real life.
I'm okay.
That the Golden State Warriors have built around him. I love him. Maybe it's just because the little point guard in me, the one that, kind of David versus Goliath, when he came into the league, no one saw him. He was drafted out of Davidson. No one really expected him to be a whole lot of anything. Definitely did not expect him to be a generational player that would change the entire league.
He may have started at Davidson,
he is Goliath.
He's Goliath now.
I mean, he's still at this age, still averaging nearly 30 points a game. I mean, he's literally a transcendent generational player that everyone, I mean, in the 90s, it was, I want to be like Mike. For a few years, it was LeBron. And really nowadays, if you go watch games on, street ball, you go to your local, park, they're slinging threes from half court because of one player. That guy is Steph Curry. So I think there's only it makes sense for it to build a
Let
franchise
me let
around
me
him.
ask one Steph question. Let me ask you one Steph question before
Okay,
you give me number two. Sorry, I know I'm interrupting. Give me
yeah,
the last one Steph question.
no, you're good. You're good.
What year, what season, what number season is Steph Curry walking into this year? This will be his
Let's see.
how
It was
many season?
2000. That is 16, I think.
It's 15. I think
Is
it's
it
15
16?
this year. I think it's
15.
15
Yeah.
this year.
Okay. I
2009, I
almost
want
said
to say.
15.
So
Yeah, I was I
2009
was
was
I
his
was
rookie
leaning on
year.
2008. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
mean, he's
15.
definitely
But doesn't he look ageless?
I
Like
mean,
we
I was shocked when I put together when he broke the record last year and they started kind of replaying. First of all, he doesn't look anything like the
he
same
still
guy.
looks
I mean, if you
12.
put rookie year to now, he looks completely different, but he still looks 12. I don't know how it's even possible. But yeah, no, I'm shocked because he feels like he hasn't aged a bit. But let's go to my number two.
Okay.
Another guy that is a likable guy around the league, something that I'm huge on about if you're going to build a franchise, you need someone that other players gravitate towards. They need to be amazing on the court. They need to be a leader on the court. They need to be like that dog that can really like get in there and just transition games when they need to, but they also need to be likable. All of that to say, the one, the only Giannis.
Hmm.
There is not a more likable player in the league. The guy, I love watching all of his clips of trying ice cream for the first time, trying a hot dog for the first time. I mean, like all of these things. I mean, you just can't help but like him. I mean, he's you if
You're
you've
right.
ever
You're
watched the
right.
Disney Plus, movie on him. I mean, he's just a likable guy. But in addition to being likable, the guy is just, I mean, next level. Last year, averaging 32 points, almost 12 rebounds, nearly 6 assists. I mean, when you're a big guy like that and you can command the floor like he does nowadays, I think that, I mean, we're even seeing it with Damian Lillard coming in. I think that in real time
Yeah.
that we're seeing the Bucks try to build around him. And so as a fictitious franchise, I think it only makes sense to build around the one, the only Giannis, just because he's big, he's fast, he's dominant, but he's also just one of those guys that everyone in the locker room, win or lose, they're going to feel inspired, going to feel encouraged, and so you're going to have like a really nice like locker room
Right.
atmosphere,
Great
which
leader.
translates onto the court. Yeah, great leader. But then we go to my number one. My number one is one of those guys that I don't necessarily love in real life. I'm not a huge fan. Maybe it's just because he always beats around my sons,
Ooh.
but there's in my mind, especially after last season, my number one has to be Jokic. I
The
mean,
Joker.
the guy, the Joker. If you've watched him in the last couple seasons, he has gradually become who he is. But last year, he just dominated.
Yeah.
There was no question in my mind who the MVP was, who really just like I mean, I think he got gypped out of the MVP. I think that he deserved it. His
If
stats,
he
I mean,
won the two before that and had the best season
I
of
mean,
his career, if he ever deserved it, it was actually last year.
it was actually last year. I think it was a pity vote to give it to
Yeah.
Embiid. I think. I mean, if you look at his stats, I mean, he was averaging as a big guy a triple double. We always talk about Russell Westbrook averaging a triple double, and everyone thinks it's this big deal to average an entire season. But he's a point guard. I mean, we expect him to get 10 plus assists every night. We expect him to get in there and maybe get some defensive rebounds. It's expected. But as a big guy, to be able to average nearly 10 assists a game, the ball on that team travels through Jokic. I mean, there's just
Yeah,
no doubt in
definitely.
my mind that if you need a big guy, especially in today's NBA, to build a team around, it's got to be the Joker because he knows how to score. He can get a rebound. He is like a Russian mafia. If like it always trips me out when they interview him at the end of the game. He's sweaty, his beat red face, and I'm like, dude, this guy's an NBA player. I
I
mean,
know,
this
right?
guy is. Are you sure he just didn't put out a hit? But what I love about him is that it's like it's work for him. It's not like I know I talked about the others being like lovable guys. The thing about the Joker is that he like looks at this as like work. He doesn't look at this as fun. He's even said like, "Who likes to go to work? I don't like to go to work." And so he goes in and he gets the job done. And you know that he's only there for one thing. He's
Oh,
not there to make friends.
but that makes
He's
you wonder. It makes you wonder. He got his ring. Is he that guy? Is he Kawhi? Kawhi
yeah.
got his ring, then got
Ooh.
paid, and now it's like, does Kawhi even like basketball? Because he doesn't seem to be trying to even get on the floor. Like that would be my only concern with him. I don't think he's that guy. I think he's the kind of guy that's like, my teammates need me, and I'm going to do what I need to do. But you do start to wonder. He doesn't. I don't put him in that same category as Steph Curry, like just relentless, or Giannis, just relentless. So I like your list. I can't argue with it, but it's clear you're going for a ring in year one, and I'm trying to build something. Okay, I'm just trying to build a long term franchise.
And speaking of players that have been in the league a long time, chasing a ring, I need us to transition to the next segment because this is one that I've been itching to get at as soon as I saw the segment lineup for tonight. We need to transition into "Don't Be That Guy."
Don't be that guy.
All right, so let's talk about it. This happened a few days ago. LeBron James starts the game off in the preseason. Yeah, I know we're talking preseason basketball, but I think this is a pretty important thing. Transitioning out of the last talk about who to build a franchise around, we're talking about, who's a leadership kind of guy. So I think this is important. LeBron James plays the first half of the preseason game, and then he comes out of the locker room and he's dressed in street clothes. Not a big deal. But then we catch him on the sidelines eating, like just hanging out like he's just a fan at a preseason basketball game, picked up the tickets for like $8, like no big deal. Come on. Tell me that you feel like this is as big of a deal as I think. I think that if we're talking leadership, yes, I know he's been in the league a long time. He's earned his stripes, if you will. He's done all of these things off the court and on the court, and everyone already looks at him. But here's my thing. He has got a team of young guys that are looking to him to see what are we supposed to do if we want to obtain a ring. And I can tell you there's one thing that you don't do. It is not play any kind of game, whether it's preseason, regular season, or playoffs, and just decide, you know what, I've done enough already. I'm good. I'm ready for the season. I've put in enough work in the off season. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go put on my blue jeans and I'm going to grab a hot dog and popcorn and I'm going to just go hang out and
Okay,
cheer you guys on. I think
first of all, we
it
know
sets a terrible
LeBron
precedence.
was not eating a hot dog and popcorn. I don't know what he's eating, but it probably cost like $97 a plate. We know he wasn't
Yeah.
eating a hot dog and popcorn. But I have two quotes to share with you. The first one
Okay.
is that former Lakers star Michael Cooper talked about this.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Michael Cooper through those great '80s Lakers teams. He said this. He said, "I didn't,
Yep.
I didn't like that about what LeBron eating on the sideline. I didn't like that. Again, he's LeBron James, but still, you got to
Doesn't
have
matter.
respect for the game." That's what Michael Cooper says. I'm
Yep.
not going to argue with
Yep.
Michael Cooper, but I'm going to give you another quote. And this quote comes from someone who we all know as a great basketball theologian, if you will, and his name is Allen
Oh,
Iverson.
can't wait to hear it.
Practice?
Oh,
Just talking
okay.
about practice? Not the game. Practice. Is that what we're talking? Practice? Not the game, but practice. Preseason.
Timeout.
Preseason, Jake. Not the regular season. Preseason. Is that what we're talking about? Preseason. Come on, man.
It sets a bad precedence. It sets the do as I say, not as I do. It like all of these like parenting tips that you hear about. I feel like LeBron James has to look at himself at this age as kind of the parent of the
Listen,
team.
LeBron's getting
And
so old, he's got to have dinner by like 4:30. So he's entering his 21st season in the league. He's like, it's 4:30. Where's my dinner? And I can say that because me and LeBron are the exact same age.
Yep, same. I get it.
Listen. If you told me I had a chance to do a "Don't Be That Guy" on LeBron James, I would have thought I'd be.
Don't
all
be
in
that
on
guy.
it. I'm giving him. You can say it. I'm giving him a pass. He's just an old guy eating a little snack on the end of the bench during a preseason game.
It's just a bad way to set yourself up for the beginning of the season. It's one of those things that can easily, we talk about load management. I think we've seen him in these last few years really take advantage of the load management. I think that it's one of those things that it just
Stop
sets your
making
team
me
up.
defend LeBron. He's in his 21st season. If
Listen,
load management was for anyone, it's literally for him.
he pays over $1 million a year to keep his body the way it is. It doesn't that, and that's not an exaggeration. That is
Yeah,
direct
no,
from
no,
him.
I've read that report.
W-
Yeah,
w- and all of these guys talking about load management and setting a good precedence, building a team around, it just reminds me of when we're talking, like, when we look back on week 6 of the NFL season, is it really that big of a deal? I think it's one of those things that the Lakers really kind of fumble in the beginning of the year, and we see them, not performing like, they kind of have that expectation of
you gonna
performing.
blame it on
And we look
LeBron's
back and
salad?
go,
LeBron had
you
a
remember,
apple gorgonzola salad with some balsamic
you,
vinaigrette down on the end of the
you
bench.
remember
You're
that
like,
ribeye the ribeye you were having during the preseason game, like, it's, was it really worth the,
you are killing me.
the ahi tartar, like, I
Now
mean, like,
that's probably right. He probably was having
yeah.
I said from now on this podcast, he is not LeBron. His name is Ahi Tartar. And
LeBron tartar.
this night on tonight, Ahi Tartar had 23 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. Oh man! Oh, anytime we get a chance
uh,
to do "Don't Be That Guy," I love it. But I want to finish up
don't be that
today
guy.
with a little something we call "Tell Me Something Good."
Tell me
He's gonna sing
something
it. He did it. He
good.
sang it. He did it. I don't know. We're gonna end up having to pay royalties on that. Here we go. So, Scott, just really quickly as previews for this weekend's action, we want to give our listeners a little heads up on some great sports that's happening over the weekend. So, tell me something good. I'm going to kick it off with the best college football matchup of the weekend, and that is number 7 Penn State is headed to Ohio State. Number 3 Ohio State.
Ooh,
And I'm
okay.
going to tell you right now, I'm going to keep this summary really short. I want to see this game for 2 reasons. Number 1, I think that Penn State is the best it has been in a lot of years. Okay, I think their defense is
True.
a little bit underrated. I think their offense is probably good enough to pull off this upset. But the
Yeah.
reason I want to see this is because I think Ohio State is entirely overrated, and I want to see a
Oh.
team fall out of the top 4.
Oh.
I want to see some
Woo.
chaos. We've seen some upsets this year, but I want to see that top 4 get shaken up. And truthfully, not Notre Dame. Ohio State has one good win this year, and it was against Notre Dame. But they beat
Notre
them by
Dame. Yeah.
3. They beat them on the last play of the game, and they beat them on a play in which the team only had 10 players on the field to try and stop them. So I'm not impressed with what Ohio
Ooh.
State's been able to do this year. So I am hoping that they lose, they're upset, and they get bumped out of the top 4 for the college football playoff.
I cannot argue with that. I think that's going to be a great one to watch in the college realm. But I'm going with the NFL. I think the matchup to watch, something that really is going to be something good to feast on, is going to be Sunday Night Football, the Miami Dolphins versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Something I liked what you said, the Bama Bowl.
The
We've
Bama
got the quarterbacks. Both are from our Alabama. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of those things that I think watching Tua versus Jalen Hurts is going to be a really fun matchup. The thing
Mm-hmm.
is that in my mind, the Miami Dolphins this year are very reminiscent of the Philadelphia Eagles of last year. I think they are
Ooh.
a high power offense. I think that they are scoring at will, and they're one of those teams that didn't at the beginning of the year didn't really seem like a playoff Super Bowl team. And now that we're in week 7, I think the Dolphins have really put themselves in playoff Super Bowl discussions. And it's also 5-1 versus 5-1. The Eagles have just suffered their first loss. They have, taken one on the chin,
I'm happy
and
about
so
that.
I think it's going to be.
I'm very happy
I'm
about that.
ecstatic about that. I think that it's one of those things that now we have a very even matchup. The Eagles are one of those teams that we could see them come out and put 40 points up on the board,
Yeah.
or we could see them put 3 field goals up. It's one of those things that I think the Eagles are very wishy-washy, and the Dolphins all year have been a team that have just proven themselves, scoring at will. And Tua, again, I go back to this, several times in this podcast over the last few weeks. Tua, we were talking retirement. Like literally, there were people calling for him to just put up the cleats, retire. It's not worth it. And he's coming out here just on fire. And it's really special to watch. I mean, Tua is a believer. I've loved watching him, do what he's done. Miami Dolphins have been one of those teams that has always felt like they should be a Super Bowl team and just never really was able to do so. It's one of those things that they just never they're just always one of those teams that feel like they should have more trophies on in the case than they do. And so I think that this is one of those years that they could really put up some surprising numbers. And I think it starts here. I think this is like a real test. Are they who we think they are? Are they really going to be a playoff team? And so it's going to be special to watch.
I think you're right. One of the reasons I'm excited about it is it's Sunday Night Football, and I am tired of the NFL putting bad matchups on Sunday Night Football. Stop worrying about what region or city or demographic or that you're getting in and you're trying to pull ratings from. Just put a great game on and people will watch. The NFL is big enough to exist outside of your concerns over which market the game is being featured in. So I'm
Yep.
excited about it. I am excited for the Bama Bowl aspect of it. That obviously Tua came in the national championship for Alabama, and Jalen Hurts was benched, and Tua led them to a
Yep.
comeback victory. Like that matters. But then it also matters that Jalen Hurts is now the guy that's been considered in the MVP running, and he's the one that's been to the Super Bowl. And I think
Yep.
while this is not my Super Bowl prediction, this is a Super Bowl style matchup. You've got a team at the top of the AFC
It
and
really
a team at the
is.
top of the NFC. So this should be a great game. I'm very excited to see it. You make a great point. Sunday Night Football. So we hope you are excited about all the good things that are happening this weekend
Oh
in the
yeah.
world of sports. We'll bring you all that information with our first show next week for you to listen and get all that recap and all that instant reaction from that we'll bring you like we always do. The other thing that we always do here at Inspired Sports is we like to end each and every episode with a biblical devotion, a truthful teaching, something to challenge you, to encourage you, to inspire you, something that we believe we've learned and something we want to share with you. So what makes us different here at Inspired Sports, we are clean sports talk with real inspiration. We love sports, but the truest and number one love for Scott and I in all of our life is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So as I share with you this week, I want to give this a simple title, and it's called The Greatest Unknown. So as I share this with you, I think of sports talk, Scott. I think of all the times that we spend ranking it and all the times we spend talking about who we would build a franchise around and who's the best team in this and who's the best team in that. We spend a lot of time talking about the word greatest, right? So
Yeah.
as I think of that, you start to think of the sports world, and there's just always an argument, right? Like who's the GOAT? Who's the best ever? Who's the greatest of all time? Is it LeBron or MJ? The truth is, it's neither, but that's for a different podcast later. Is it Montana
Oh.
or is it Mahomes?
Wow.
Did I leave Brady out
Neither.
on purpose? Yes, I did, and it's for a reason, but that's for a podcast later. Let's see, is it Babe Ruth or is it Willie Mays? I don't know. Why don't you
Oh.
give Shohei Ohtani about 5 more years, and I think you'll have your answer. I mean, we could even do college football. Is the best college football player season of all time Tim Tebow or is it Joe Burrow? Actually, why don't you go look up how many yards per game Barry Sanders averaged in 1988? It's north of 200. So I think that's your answer. But honestly, just me bringing up all of those topics, I can hear Scott just gritting his teeth, having to hear those takes on who's the greatest of all time. And I know that's the way that all sports fans think. And honestly, when I start to think about the things that are associated with the word greatest, I really and truly do think of a conversation that Jesus had with a Pharisee in Matthew chapter 22. I want to share that with you. It's just a few scriptures, but this is what it says. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees with his reply, they met together to question him again. So the Pharisees are asking Jesus a question, and this is what they say. One of them, an expert in religious law, tried to trap him with this question: Teacher, what is the most important commandment in the law of Moses? Jesus replied, You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first, and here you go, Scott, the greatest commandment. But then verse 39 says, A second is equally important: love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments. And that's the end there of verse 40. What I loved about this is that Jesus's answer to this question is the perfect example of like modern sports talk. Who's the greatest of all time? It's LeBron and MJ. It's like both. It's like you asked me for the greatest, but I gave you two answers. Jesus
I
gave
give
him
it
two.
two.
He's like,
Yeah.
hey, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Oh, but also love your neighbor as yourself. So he actually gave two answers, which always just kind of makes me chuckle. But he's clearly making one thing clear. You're like, well, why did Jesus give two answers if he was asked for the greatest? Well, the common thread there is the singular greatest command, which is love. Is that God has said to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And he said to love your neighbor as yourself. So clearly, the greatest commandment, if you're going to boil it down, is love. And that's what I think we miss sometimes, is that we're like, hey, all of the greatest commandments are the 10 commandments. The greatest commandments are what we're not supposed to do. And I think that's what Jesus was coming to say. It was like, absolutely, those are 10 commandments. Those matter very much. He said all of the demands and all of what the prophets taught and all of the law is based on these two things. But if you notice, he doesn't take time to tell people what not to do. He flips it around and he says the greatest commandments are proactive decisions to love. Love is an action, it is a verb, it is something that you do, that you live, that you share, that you give, that you receive. And he's saying, if you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and you'll love your neighbor as yourself, all those other things will come. Doesn't mean that you'll be perfect, but it'll all be in perspective and it will all flow together for you to live the life and the lifestyle that he wants for us to live. And so as I continue to think about that, it also makes me think of John chapter 15, verses 12 through 13. And this is what it says. It's Jesus, and he's talking to his disciples, and he says, "This is my commandment. Love each other the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends." And I don't really have time to go into all of John 15. I know you know this, Jake, but he goes on to talk about how the disciples, hey, I call you friend now. That's the level of relationship we have reached, is that you are now friend. You're not servant. You're not anything else. You are friend. And he says, there's no greater love. The greatest love is that you would lay down your life for one of your friends. And obviously, he's foreshadowing that he's going to go lay down his life to be the sacrifice, not just for the disciples, but for all of mankind, for all of time, for those who would be willing to accept him as their savior and to repent of their sins and to ask for his forgiveness. Like it's a beautiful picture that he's meeting their need in that moment by telling them to love each other, but then he's also foreshadowing to us, right? He's talking to us all these years later for the lifestyle that we're supposed to live. So Jesus is, he answers the question about what's the greatest commandment, and then he loops back around a little later. He's like, hey, in case you guys didn't get it, let me be very, very clear. This is my commandment. Love each other the same
Yep.
way I have loved you. There's no greater love than to lay down one's life
Wow.
for one's friend. And so
Wow.
I could go into like that word love there and all the Greek meanings for the word love and all these, and I don't really have time for that. And truthfully, it's not the point, because love, deep down in our hearts, we know what love looks like. We know that love is intentional, it's sacrificial, it's merciful, it's joyful. It's literally the life and the death of Jesus Christ. And that's the love that we get to live with when we receive him. It's the greatest love, and yet it's also the greatest unknown. His love for us is immeasurable. His love for us is so much greater. And I know you know this, and maybe I'm just reminding myself, Jake, of all of these things. Or maybe I'm just encouraging someone who's known the Lord for a long time and has just kind of grown cold to the word love. Because truthfully, we use the word love in such a diluted way in our modern culture. I love tacos and I love Jesus. And you're like, those
Right.
should have different words associated with them. And so as I think about this, there's one last scripture I want to share, and then I'll wrap this up. But the greatest love is obviously the love that Jesus Christ has made available to us, the life that he lived and that he gave up for us. But it leads to the greatest unknown, which is the greatest unknown is to truly know and understand what he really went through for us to have access to that love. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 24 tries to explain it, It says this. This is what Peter wrote. He personally carried our sins in his body on the cross so that we can be dead to sin and live for what is right. By his wounds, you are healed. It's the New Living Translation. And so we have all these accounts in the Bible of what happened to Jesus. And I'll keep it where, this is a family-friendly podcast, so I'll keep it on more of a surface level. But obviously, he went through a lot of physical pain. He went through a lot of being treated very poorly and being, I will use this word, he was beaten severely, right? And he carries his own cross, and he gives his life on the cross, and he dies on the cross for us,
Yeah.
right? And so we have all of these accounts from the Bible, but that doesn't paint a clear enough picture. In our modern culture, Jake, we even have all of the movies, all the different Jesus movies and the films that have tried to put a physical representation to it. And they're graphic and they're emotional and they're moving. And yet it still doesn't even come close for us to understand how great that love was. The greatest unknown for us in all of human history is for us to fully understand what Jesus went through to be a sufficient sacrifice to bear all of our sins on the cross for our salvation, for our redemption, for our eternal opportunity to be in heaven with the Lord. And so as I was just preparing for tonight, all I could think was, man, I just want people to take some time this week. This is my challenge. We usually try to end with a challenge, you and I. And so this is just my challenge for everyone. If you have an opportunity this week, or make an opportunity truly, and make some time for you to sit and to listen to the Lord and to be in his word and to maybe read those scriptures for yourself or read the whole chapter, get the whole picture. But take some time, whether it's by yourself or even with your family, and reflect on how great God's love has been in your life. And that's probably going to start for many of you at a point of salvation, but then it also continues to flow all through your life. The moments he was there, the moments you needed a breakthrough, the moments he heard you, the moments you cried, the moments he held you, the moments you were in the presence of God, the moments you were at your church, the moments you were at home in your prayer time, the moments you were in your car worshiping, whatever that looks like, man, take the time to sit down and go, Lord, you really have been there. And your love is so great. And it's so great because I'll never have to know just how difficult my redemption was and how much you bared to make it possible. And if you're out there listening and you've never made Jesus Christ the savior of your life, man, we at Inspired Sports, Jake and I, you can listen to the Meet the Host podcasts as they come out, where we'll explain how we came to know Jesus Christ, and what our lives look like before and after, and the effect he's had on us, and our love for him, and why. And I just want to take a moment to say, man, if that's you, you're not listening to this by accident. If you're listening to this, it's because God is trying to get a message through to you about just how much he loves you. He's not concerned about all of your mistakes and all of your sins and all the things you've done you wish you hadn't done. Mm-hmm. He's looking for you to reach out to him so he can forgive you of that, cleanse you of that, set you on the right path for you to do as it says in 1 Peter chapter 2, so that you can be dead to sin and live for what is right. So I hope that you're encouraged by that, and I hope that you're able to take some time to reflect on it, because that's what I've done this week as I was preparing for this. And I was like, man, I don't ever want to grow cold to how great the love of God is in my life. Hey, how about we do this real quick just for our fans out there who love predictions? We've been told they love when we make predictions because they love when we're wrong, truthfully. Who you got? Who you got as the winner? Give me the Eagles-Dolphins winner real fast. We'll put it in the predictions for the week.
Dolphins. Tua, 4 touchdowns. Eagles. Definitely going
that
all
Eagles
the way.
Defense is going to smack them around just like the Bills did. That's it. We're on each side of it. We're on opposite sides. Well, there you go. There's your prediction for what is going down on Sunday Night Football. Hey, we want to thank all of our listeners and all of our watchers on all of our platforms. Thank you for enjoying Inspired Sports, your place for clean sports talk with real inspiration.